All right. Hey there, Matt Petrowski here. This is a Friday for me, and I just figured I'd just hop on YouTube Live just for no reason and just start streaming whatever comes in my mind about FileMaker. We'll see if anybody shows up on the system. I'll occasionally glance to the side, look at the chat, and see what's going on. But let's switch to my desktop, which I will do now. Boom, we're magically there. Blank screen, and what I've done is I've deleted FileMaker's preferences for me, and I guess I could go through and show you, having worked with FileMaker for so long, I could show you what are some of the things or steps that I might do. Let me switch over here on my browser and make sure I can see the chat out of the side of my eye. I didn't announce this, so I have no idea if anybody's going to show up for this, even though it's streaming live, but a few people may show up. All right, FileMaker, let's switch over there to FileMaker Pro. All right, so, and one thing I'll do is let's go ahead and hide Safari there in the background, and I can probably get this off screen at least so that we'll have just a nice clear screen in order to work with. All right, so this is what I'm confronted with. I'm a brand new user. I might be tempted to use this get started right here. In fact, I just recently investigated what FileMaker was doing. You may be interested in that, but as a new user, I'm probably going to select one of these starters. For me, I'm just going to go with blank here. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and go with one of these starters. Let's go with an assets right here. And when I click to create this, I'm just going to save it somewhere and then see what I've got as a starting point. So if I'm completely unfamiliar with FileMaker, if I've never used FileMaker before, I've got this window and I'll probably play around here. And I've clicked 2 times there and I get this little dialog that says no records are present. To create a new record, choose the new record menu command. I say okay. I might go up to the records menu. Now here's what I would suggest. If you're just starting out with FileMaker, or with any software for that matter, the best thing to do is basically, the first thing that I do with most software in order to become familiar with it is just go through the menu. It is go through the menu, take a look at everything that you've got. We'll take a look at some of the things that we can do here once we get into looking at these features. But if I was new, I would be going through all of the menus here. So preferences, I would be going through. I'd look at the file menu, see what I've got available to me so I can create something new. I can do my favorites, my recent items, hosts. Okay, I'm going to connect to a FileMaker host. Open a file, close. That's pretty simple. Manage. As a new FileMaker developer, I might not be familiar with these. This is the core of where you're going to spend most of your time with FileMaker. You're going to be going to the database in and out a lot. The security, a lot of people save this for later. Value lists, okay, that's pretty straightforward. Layouts. If I had to break FileMaker down into 3 things, it is these 3 things. It is your database. It is, which a lot of developers, if you're new to FileMaker, this is going to be called schema. You're going to hear that word often, but it is this one, this one, and this one. And you can see that FileMaker really only assigns shortcut keys to those. They are the core of FileMaker. You're going to be creating your schema, or how you structure your data, and you're going to be interacting with that by using your layouts, and then you're going to be automating things by using your scripts. External data sources, we can use that later. Containers, this is something that you will initially set up. For a beginner, this is a good thing to know about. When it comes to containers, you need to choose from the outset of whether your external data is what we consider it. That's videos, audio, anything that's a document, a Microsoft document, an Excel spreadsheet, anything that you want to associate to a record. Best thing to do is think about yourself as a person, and maybe you're creating an expense report database, and you're going to have scans of your invoices and receipts. Those are going to be attached. They're going to be stored in containers, and in these containers, you get to choose whether that's stored as part of the file, meaning directly in the file itself, or externally. If you're going to have a lot of those things, if it's a medical database and you're storing images, x-rays, what have you, external containers are going to be the way that you want to go. By default, FileMaker is going to store those containers internally, and you're going to basically end up with a file that's going to grow and grow and grow and grow. We don't want to have a file that's going to include all of this stuff if we can keep it separate. There's a nice way that you can structure servers such that you can have separate hard drives when you set up a FileMaker server, and those separate hard drives allow you to have all of your container data stored on a dedicated drive, and then the actual FileMaker file on FileMaker server is stored somewhere else. And it's much easier and more lightweight to back up that one single FileMaker file than it is a FileMaker file with all of the junk. Well, you probably don't consider it junk, but all of that stuff integrated into the file. So it's really good to separate the two, but if it's a really lightweight database, then you, of course, can put that container data into your FileMaker file, and this is where you're going to manage it. Themes, pretty much this is lightweight. You're only going to deal with this when you need to deal with it. It's usually just one or few times. You're going to pick that, apply the theme to your file, and then you're just going to be adding styles, and that's in the course of working within layout mode. Let's see, sharing. We could go do a whole video about uploading and going to the host. I've talked about that on the magazine website. File options. This is a good one. As a beginner, what you're going to do is you're going to end up managing a lot of files. And let's take a look at what that looks like. You're going to have this right here where you are going to, hey, John, looks like we had somebody pop up. Keyframe 1 second. I'm getting here for 4 seconds or less. 1 second. It's wanting me to change my stream setting for a second here. Forget it. We'll change those later. Wanted me to adjust my keyframes. But in the FileMaker way, you are going to be managing all of your apps, as they call them, which I still think of them as databases. Here in this window, how did I even get there? I should do that. So here we've got this file, create new. I just know it as show favorites right here, Command Option O. So when I use that key shortcut, Command Option O, I'm bringing up the original window or the main window that you see whenever you open a FileMaker. Now here, you're going to have all of your individual apps. You can add them if they are on FileMaker server. You can see when I click add right there, it's got this show hosts, which you can add that right there. You can also add it from a local file using this browse option right here. But this is the FileMaker way of giving you all of your management of all of your different FileMaker systems that you're connecting to. Now, I prefer a different way. If I was brand new to FileMaker and FileMaker presented me with this, this is great, but I like to manage my own. I like to set things up. I like to be in full control. This is convenient and it's saved within FileMaker's preferences, but to me, it's not something that's persistent because FileMaker can crash, FileMaker preferences can go away. So what I prefer to do is if we take a look and go to the preferences, if I was a new FileMaker user, in the preferences, one of the things they added here was at startup, open a file. So as a new FileMaker user, you probably don't know this is there, but this is something that I would tend to use. Let's go ahead and create something that this can take advantage of so that you can see what I'm talking about. So we've got the FileMaker method right here where we're going to add apps. It's right here. It's Command Option O. It's immediate, but if you want to take full control, you can create your own. So I'm going to go up to the File menu and I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to click on the blank option and then we will click Create. And I'm going to call this file Launcher. So you can use a FileMaker file to launch as many other FileMaker files that you might want to connect to, regardless of whether they're local on your machine or remotely hosted. So by creating this launcher file and having it local on my system, what I can do now is we'll just click OK. And we can even close that file if we wanted to. It doesn't really matter. We're just going to go to the general preferences of FileMaker now. And we are going to say for my copy of FileMaker, what I want to do is at startup, I want to browse and add my launcher. So by adding this launcher file, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, every time that FileMaker starts up now, I'm the one that has a file designated, and that file can then go out and open as many different FileMaker files as I want. So we'll say okay, and let's go ahead and quit FileMaker down. So FileMaker is out of the way, it's gone. I'm going to open it up. We're going to see what happens. It should open that launcher file, and there it is. So at this point, this is where you now have full control. So as a newbie FileMaker developer coming into a file that I am familiar with and comfortable, and this is it from a developer perspective, obviously that particular feature under the settings, which I'll open up, this feature is something that you can, if you are an admin of a FileMaker server, you can designate this as part of an installer when it's distributed to a bunch of other users. So when you're deploying, let's say, a dedicated solution, then that solution is going to, within the installer, use this particular setting right here and open up whatever the application is that that particular user is going to be using FileMaker for. If the I don't know what you call it, company, enterprise, I was looking for a word there. If they are using multiple FileMaker solutions, then what you're going to want to do is more or less the same thing as what I'm doing right here, which is open a launcher. Now, there's multiple ways that you can launch a FileMaker file. You can launch them via a URL or via aliases, shortcuts, I believe. Well, what is Windows? Windows calls them shortcuts, and Mac calls them, I forget. I think of them as aliases or symbolic links. But doing this with a file is really pretty nice. So the first thing I would do here is I would go and I would say, I'm going to set this to list view. Notice that the first file that you create, this file comes with all views enabled. I can target here through the form view, through the list view, and through the table view. Now, one of the things we want to do within our FileMaker solutions is we typically want to limit our views to what that view is about. So I'm going to go into layout mode. I did that with Command or Control L. And then there's a couple ways that I can modify this layout in order to get to its layout settings. I can go up to the layouts menu that we have right here, and I can choose the layout setup. But one of the ways that I commonly do this is I simply you can right click on the layout itself, and you can find that same setting right there, layout setup. And once you get into this dialog, this is where you're able to limit the number of views, or limit the views that are possible for a particular layout. So we go to views, and you can see right here in this subsection of views, I can now turn on or off all of the different views: form view, list view, table view. And I have properties here with table view. So if I'm not going to use these two because I want to enforce that list view is the view that I'm going to use, then of course I'm going to have that set as the default view, and that was set because I had made that switch when I was in browse mode. Now here's something that I like to turn off for myself. If you are a new user and you always want to be reminded of this, you want to know that you made changes to the layout, maybe you're worried you're working in a solution where you shouldn't have made a change to the layout, then of course you're going to keep this on. If you're developing with FileMaker, I am clicking that and clicking save. I don't ever want to know because I want to be able to go into layout mode, add something, and then just go back into browse mode. Just interactively, it is Command L, Command B, Command L, Command B, Command L, Command B. You're going back and forth as you develop a lot within FileMaker. All right, so what else are we going to do here if I'm a new FileMaker user? If I'm a new FileMaker user and I don't know about FileMaker, well, right off the bat, I can see that some of the things that I'm used to that have been new in the solution are the panes. So if you don't and haven't worked with FileMaker before, we've got the panes right here. There are keyboard shortcuts, but I'm going to either hide and show these. Now, there's one thing that's sort of really difficult about this particular situation. It used to be that in FileMaker, there were the inspector in particular, this one over on the side, and you can't swap them, which is unfortunate. These are not draggable. They are all or nothing. It is either showing or not showing, and you do not get to control where it is. But the inspector used to be detached. So as a newer FileMaker user, I would like to know that under the view, let's see, customize inspectors, there it is. So when we go to that view menu, and hopefully I'm not blocking this, let's see if I can get that a little bit higher there. So we can see that there's the command I, which is I for inspector. Really easy. You can create a new inspector. So this harkens back to a previous day when the inspector was completely detached. Now, why would you want to know that as a new FileMaker developer? This is actually what the environment used to look like, what we have on screen right here. What was nice about this is if you are developing for a screen, and let's say you've got your layout is, my monitor is only a 1080 right now, or it's 1920 by 1080. I like to be able to go into browse mode and see on screen what I'm going to get. You go back and forth in between browse mode and layout mode. Now, what's really nice about that is look at that. When you're in browse mode, the inspector goes away and you can't see it, and you go back into layout mode, and then the tool palette is right there conveniently for you. Well, I forget where they did this change, but along the way they figured, oh, we're going to make attached panels. Now you can already see what the problem is. I just showed both of those panels, but my window's not fully on screen. In fact, if I bring it on screen by dragging it on screen now, I can see both of the panels, but this is the problem. I switch into browse mode and my window shrinks down. I go back into layout mode and it shrinks back out. This was a big irritation when they made this switch. I've gotten used to it, but the irritation is the fact that what I'm looking at on screen, going back and forth between the two modes, which you're commonly doing a lot, is not very convenient in terms of being able to see what you get. WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. That's not true in this case. I see all this stuff, but I go into browse mode and I'm getting something completely different. So that would just be a matter of turn off all of those, go to that inspector, and now you can have that old behavior. Also, what I'd like to know as a new developer is anything that makes it quicker and easier for me to develop. So in layout mode, since we're here now, this inspector, what's really important to know is that all of these areas, which I'm going to categorize these as you're probably here, here, and here 90% of the time, and you're here probably maybe 10%, maybe 5%. Not a whole lot. You're not typically looking at these styles, or I should say I'm not typically looking at these styles a lot, mostly because I can select styles in different ways. You can context click and right click on a style once you're familiar with the styles, but you do end up coming in here when you're theming things a lot. That's usually the most of the time is when I'm actually doing my theming. But if I had, say, for example, an object right here, actually a button's a better pick. Let's pick the button right here. I'll type in button right there. Notice that when I am choosing the style here, I can move and cycle through the different styles that are available here. But note that you can right click on any object, and I can also get to access to those styles. Let's see, arrange, where are the styles? They were here previously. Button action, fill color, pen color. Maybe they're not anymore. I could have sworn that I was able to do that before. Well, guess not. Button, there we go, object style. I knew it was there. Why is it not on that button? Am I just missing it? No, I'm just not paying attention. There it is right there. So you're able to go right here and switch these. So once you become familiar, it's much easier when you're working to just stay right there. I was completely having live video issues there, not even seeing my own styles. But the inspector, those are the two ways you can simply change on the style right there. But what I was saying, what's important to know about these areas, these primary areas, is they are all triggered by a key. So if I do command 1, notice that it will jump into that 1 position, 2, that was command 2, command 3, command 4. And on Windows, it's just going to be control 1, control 2. Now, that becomes important because we want to know, or once you become familiar with all of the myriad of things that are in this inspector palette, you're constantly just moving between those. And if you're mousing around to do everything, if that inspector is not, and it's off to the side, and you're using FileMaker the way that FileMaker presents it as, the amount of mouse travel that you can have in FileMaker is quite significant. As a new user, you may not notice it, but as you become more proficient, it's a really big pain, because FileMaker, I refer to the application as sort of dialogue hell, because you ultimately end up going maybe even sometimes 4 dialogues down in order to get access to something. So because there's so many different settings, like there is in the inspector, it's buried within these 4 panels. They don't just have one monolithic panel with a filter, which might be helpful, but knowing that you can cycle through those is super important. Being able to do your 1, 2, and your 3. All right, so what else would I like to know as a newer FileMaker developer? I mean, I'd like to know it all, but you can't know it all. You have to take it in little bits and pieces. In fact, give yourself a good number of years, 3 years, I'd say, in order to become super proficient with FileMaker, unless you're just already adept at other technologies and things just pick up really quickly. Our area over here on the other side, it's composed predominantly, they recently released this add-ons feature, but predominantly it was fields and objects. So this would probably be a good one for newer FileMaker developers. When you are working in FileMaker, now we're not using this quick feature that FileMaker has. This let's go to, I didn't want to create new. Oh, there it is right there. So this get started, this is using a new method of designing a FileMaker database, which is even more simplistic and, I hate to use the term, but dumbed down from what we have right here. But essentially, when you are creating your structure within a FileMaker file, you're spending a lot of time initially creating that structure in conjunction with laying out how the database is going to be interacted with. So here in layout mode, which is what we're in, we are basically wanting to add these fields. But you can see that I don't currently have any fields in my FileMaker solution. So I'm going to need to be adding these fields. Now, there's a number of ways that you can add fields, and this is really good to know as a new FileMaker developer. As an older FileMaker developer, I am very used to using this manage menu that we took a look at, where we've got the 3 settings, the database, the layouts, and the scripts. I'm used to using this right here, Command-Shift-D. This is just my default because of habit. I am in this dialog. I am adding fields like, let's put in name first, and then put in a name last, and adding these fields in this dialog. Now, this is a modal situation. It's not very fluid with what I'm doing, and it's old school because that was the only way that you could add fields to FileMaker prior to, I forget what version. So you notice that I can't click here in the background. This dialog is in a mode, and I have to click OK. That is not the only way that you add fields. In fact, if you're newer with FileMaker, you may have already become used to the fact that down here you have the ability to add fields. Of course, within this area, I should be able to, can I double click or right click? No, I cannot. I have to click that new field right there, but it will give me the opportunity to add the field where I could add the address, but I have to go back and I have to click that. There is also another method where you can add fields that, if you are doing a planning stage where you're thinking about all of the pieces of information that you're going to be tracking, then you can do this in table view. So in this particular database, or in this particular layout in this database, I've already turned off table view. If you are in the beginning stages of a database and you have not started to work on the layout and the way that things look, I'm going to go back into my layout setup here, and I'll go back to that views area, and I'll turn on my table view. And here's just some of the things I like to do on table view for my sake. I like to turn on all of these parts, primarily because within the top navigation or header or footer, and there's some history here about the top navigation versus bottom header and footer. It used to be that FileMaker only had a header and a footer. The newer layout parts are top navigation and bottom navigation. These were introduced right around the time that FileMaker Mobile was released, and that's because these are static. These top navigation and bottom navigation cannot take advantage of pinch and zoom within FileMaker Go. So within FileMaker Go, or if you're making a native app by using the SDK that FileMaker has, these two you choose if you don't want to allow the user pinch and zoom. The header and footer you can use, which will be above the body part, and this will be below the body part if you do want to support pinch and zoom for some reason in those areas. I like to turn these all on when I'm using table view, for the reason being that I can put buttons and utility features into this particular view. Now, I don't create a whole lot of FileMaker solutions that have or use table views. Table view was added more or less because it's widely known that Excel and spreadsheets, Google Sheets, people use and abuse Sheets to heck. And it was desired, I guess, somewhere along FileMaker's course that FileMaker have a spreadsheet-like view. So the table view facilitated that, but it's not really very conducive to a lot of solutions because you want to control the user experience. And so I don't put it in a whole lot. But when I do use it, I like to make the grids a lighter color, and I just leave those on. One thing that also benefits you is the custom height that you have here in the settings for table. If you're using table view in order to look at images, this is where you can definitely give it a much higher value if you want to be able to see larger images in table view. But for the most part, that isn't needed when you're dealing with a lot of data. But with that table view on, we can get back to what I was going to be showing you about basically working with the schema. So we have the manage database, which is we can add fields here. We also have in layout mode, if we happen to be there, the new field that we can add right there. But when we're in browse mode, we can simply just add fields by clicking right here, and that field will get added. Now, just like we saw in the sidebar area with fields, you can control all of the settings for a field. So if you're doing a lot of planning, you're writing, maybe you've got a separate piece of paper or however or a separate program, and you're documenting all the things that you want to track, which I highly suggest that you do before you just jump into the database. Because a lot of times people will, newer FileMaker and even intermediate FileMaker developers will get into this bad situation where they start to double track things. And what I mean by double track is, if you can break an object down to its lowest form, that's the best way to store it from a data perspective. If you can't, then what ends up happening is a lot of duplicate data. And here's a prime example. When you are going to be creating, let's say, an educational solution or a business solution, it doesn't matter what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with people, people are what you're dealing with. And you can create a table called people and just use that to track all people. But this is the biggest problem that users come across is I'm in an education environment and I'm creating an education solution. So I'm managing students and teachers. I've got staff. There's administrative people that aren't teachers. And I've got a student that may be an associate professor or an assistant. I've got all those different things that I'm tracking. No, you don't. You're tracking people. Those are all just designations. I've got customers, I've got vendors, I've got people who are my suppliers. What distinguishes a supplier from a vendor? Nothing. They're all people. And that is one of the universal problems that any new or intermediate developer comes into, is they're thinking in the context of the environment with which they're trying to solve a problem. And they're not boiling it down to the lowest level of what it is that they're tracking. You're tracking and dealing with a person. That person then has qualities, attributes, settings, whatever, however you want to think about them, that designates and distinguishes that person from a different person. And that's a complete mental shift from how a lot of people get into database development in terms of their thinking. But sidebar off to the side now, this is a way that you can, once you've said, okay, I'm tracking a person, what is it I need to track with a person? It is their address, it is their phone number, it is all these things. You just sit here and you just click the plus sign and you keep adding these things. Now let's put in a zip code right here. Now, by default, FileMaker is going to default all of these fields. It doesn't matter whether you add them via this method, which we can see in them added here, even though I added in table view, or if I'm here, you can see that the default for all of these is text. Now, a lot of the times you do want to use text even when you think you want to use a number, unless you know that it's a pure number. So the zip code, we can see right here that I can choose, and I can change this to any of the types that FileMaker supports. I can change this to a number. Likewise, if I'm in browse mode and I'm looking at that zip, when I hover here, I get this little arrow, and I, of course, can change this as well. There's our field options right there. We'll zoom out, zoom back in over here, and we can see that we can access all of the options right there. So there's multiple ways, and one of the things that I'm still getting used to as an old school FileMaker developer is taking advantage of these features depending on where I am in the solution. So um, if I'm developing a FileMaker solution, and a lot of the times you're doing parallel development where you're developing the UI at the same time that you're developing the actual schema. One of the cool things is, as a newer user, I would use multiple windows. So let's go into layout mode here, and I'm going to change the layout setup here. Well, let's use this very first layout for the purpose of, let's say, working with my schema. So I'm working with my schema, but I also want to start to design the UI. Now, depending on the type of person that you are, maybe you just want to take care of all of the schema and you really just want to dig into the guts and you want to put up, all of the underneath inside. For me, I like to it gets me excited to actually develop the UI and see the interaction that the user can have with the solution, adding the schema at the same time. So it doesn't matter how you approach this. You can these are the routes you can go. You can design the full UI, then create the schema, and then implement the schema into the UI. That's basically, I could go in here and I could say, I'm going to want a button here. I'm going to say this is going to be a field. Well, that didn't take my button, but let's see. Actually, it did take my button. This is a good way to find out if something happens like that, where it added an invisible button. I'm going to do a quick Command A, and I can see right there, it shows me all of my outlines. So I can see that that button that I had on the layout, even though I didn't put it there, that was a Command or Control A, it got added there. One of the downfalls of what they've done here is for the default button, which I created this particular theme for Claris, but the default is currently set to like a transparent button. So you may end up with invisibles on your layout that you want to get rid of. But let's go back to the sequence. So I can add my UI here, and I can add in placeholders for fields. That would look like grabbing the little text tool that we have right here and then simply just dragging this out, and this is going to be like my first name field. So I don't even have to add the schema, and I can just start to play here in FileMaker's, let's get a border on that button. There we go. So I can play with this. Now, duplicating things, it's very important. You see that plus that came on that I have right there? I'm holding down the Option key. To me, it's never made sense to go up to the text tool again and drag something out and put in last name right here. It doesn't make sense to go up and do that. I'm right here. It's already here, what I want, a label. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag that with the Option key and make a duplicate. And I can make as many as I want, and then I, of course, can align those. Which, if you're interested, you want to align them, I can right-click with all of them selected and choose the Arrange option right here. And I can... all the way down at the bottom there. Let's zoom in all the way down there. So we've got that menu hell right there, and we can align them all to their left edges and just do things. The contextual aspects of FileMaker are really pretty nice. Our other option was to create all of the schema, which we can go through and create all the schema, and then we add the UI, or we can do both of them at the same time. I find myself doing both of them at the same time, and what I'm leading up to is this tip right here: use multiple windows to do that. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like us going here and taking the time to create a second window. So I'm going to go up to this option of window. I'm going to create a new window. Now what I don't have is I don't have a second layout in this solution. So at this stage, I need to create a second layout. There's multiple ways that I could do that. I could go to the layout with the new layout report. If I do this, then I am forced through FileMaker's little dialog. As a developer for many, many years now, this is more of a hindrance to me and not something that I choose to go through. If, as a newer FileMaker developer, you are interested in using this, FileMaker is just basically going to throw a couple defaults your way. You can say, yes, I'm designing it for either tablet or for a printer or for the computer, and then you can choose between form, list, table, what have you. One of the nice things about this little wizard is that when I choose this form and I click Finish, as we saw before, the very first layout that we had at the beginning of this video, you'll notice when I go into browse mode here, FileMaker has turned off the other views, whereas the very first layout that we started with, it had all views enabled. So what I'm going to show you, my preferred method, is when I create a new layout, I just create it within the Layouts dialog. And that's either by duplicating a layout that I had before or creating a new one there. I rarely, if ever, use this new layout report option. And that's just because I probably have it. And I don't like that FileMaker. FileMaker does give me the option to add fields and maybe make it easier for me. But once you get used to FileMaker's environment, it actually gets in the way more than it does help. Other than the fact that it is really nice that it disables those alternate views and just limits it just to the view that you've chosen. But here's the way that I would actually do this, or I wish someone would tell me if I was a new user. I'm going to go to Manage, and remember we've got those three: database, layouts, and scripts. Hard code these into your mindset because I'm going to just use them myself. Command-Shift-L is what I would have brought up. So if in the situation that I was looking at, I only had the one window up, and I wanted to create a new layout, I would Command-Shift-L, I would bring up the layouts right off the bat, and then I can create a new layout right here. Or better yet, if you already have a layout that has a lot of things that you already are going to use, unless there's so many that you don't want to have to, it works like this. Create something new if you know that there is not a whole lot of things that you want to take advantage of on an existing layout. If you have an existing layout that already has things that you want to take advantage of, let's say buttons, fields, etc., then duplicate that layout. If on the layout that you want to duplicate, there's so many things that you don't want to have to take the time to reassign those things, then don't duplicate the layout, create a new layout. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about. So I have this layout right now, and I can select any one of these layouts to duplicate them. But this current layout that I'm looking at behind this dialog has a button and a first name. So if this has the fields and everything that I want, I can just duplicate this layout, and then I can open this layout by clicking the open button right here. Now, what's nice about this is, launcher. I was on, what was I on here? I'm on launcher copy now, and that went to a table view for some reason. Let's go and see what this one is. Let's open that. Let's open all of our layouts. Layout 2. That's just a browse mode. Oh, it's probably because there we go. I'm in layout mode, and I'm looking at this expecting that it's in form view. I'm expecting that the layout is going to look like this, but the layout view is set to table view, which is true. So when I created that duplicate and I got confused there, you have to know that it's easy to get confused in FileMaker in that particular way. So I'm looking at layout mode, but the layout mode is not presenting what I'm going to get when I go into browse mode because I had switched the view to this table view. So important thing to note. So let's get everything set up in this file. I'm wanting to work on layout mode at the same time as being able to work on my schema. That's the buildup that I'm giving you here, is I am going to work with the table mode in order to create and add fields without having to go into the defined database, because that's just an easy thing to do. So for this layout, I'm going to go to the layout setup for this particular layout, my main layout, go to my views. I'm going to turn on form view, switch it to the form view, turn off table and list because this is going to be my UI, this layout number 1. Now when I go into browse mode, it will look like I'm expecting, which we have right here. And over here on the copy of that layout, it is already going to be, because I was originally creating in that table view, it's simply a copy of that same layout or that same view. So now what I can do is I can, in essence, work on layout mode here, but still edit my schema. Now, old school me goes like this: Command-Shift-D, I need to add some fields. New school you, you could add the field right here without leaving your layout mode, or just right here, you can just click, I need a new field. So this multi-window development approach is really efficient because FileMaker is very context specific about what you do when you do it. That includes adding script steps and it includes adding fields. So I can have we won't be getting into it now, but a related table or a related setup where I'm adding related fields and I'm adding them to a portal here. Typically what I'm going to do is in FileMaker, notice that when I'm on a layout here and I open up the define database with that Command-Shift-D, if the fields is selected, what will happen is FileMaker will go into the table based on what table is associated to the layout you're looking at. Right now, I don't have multiple tables. I'll need to add one. Let's go ahead and add one. I'll call this URLs. And we'll go ahead and just add that. And we'll say OK. Now, FileMaker is going to automatically add. We can see right there, FileMaker added this layout for us. It just does that anytime you create a new table. Fortunately, it doesn't each time you add a new table occurrence, but it does that. So if you want this particular, and by the way, if you're new to FileMaker and you are seeing this on the side right here, this ID where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, this will not be in your FileMaker. You will not see this in your window. This is something that's coming from a plugin that I installed called the Monkey Bread plugin. But let's go ahead and open that right here just so I can prove my point about how context-specific FileMaker is. And if you learn this from the outset as a new user, then it really helps you out when you're developing, especially when you're scripting. So this particular table, launcher, is based off of the table occurrence. And I'm going to have to go into the database, define database, go to the relationships area, and currently we only have 2 tables, and we have 2 table occurrences. If you're new to FileMaker, I'm not going to get into the concept of multiple table occurrences, which I just did right there. I created essentially an alias of a table. Let's get rid of that. Let's just say we've got 2 tables, 2 occurrences. Launcher represents one layout. URLs represents another. Watch what happens when I'm in layout mode, which I'll go into layout mode on both of them. So I've got 2 windows, and I've got window 1 is based off of the launcher table. Window 2 here, or window 3 in this case, is based off of the URLs table. So I'm here and I open up Command-Shift-D. Let's go to the fields. Notice that I'm in the URLs table. If I close this dialog out or get out of this table, simply shift my context to this other window, which is now based on launcher, open up Command-Shift-D. Notice that FileMaker has switched me to the launcher table. So FileMaker picks up on context both within development and when it's in use by users. So context becomes, I don't know, I don't even think that there's a whole lot of FileMaker developers that pick up on that because it applies when you're in the scripting workspace as well. It will take the context of whatever the base table is based on the window that's frontmost. But this is my preferred method of working. I will be designing my layout right here, and I will use an open table that I can just push off to the side if I need to, and just bring that and say I need some new fields, and just start to click those. I'm also tracking, let's say, an email. And I've got that. And here I'm able to do all the changes that I need. I'm able to get to my field options by choosing on that and bringing those up. I can also do that over here right on layout mode by simply just selecting the field that I need to modify. And can I choose my field options? I should be able to right click. There we go. So on the field in layout mode, I can right click and get access to my field options. I can also rename or delete. Rename is an interesting one because I believe if you hit the return key, there we go, I just hit that. I can just rename this to whatever I want. Now, and FileMaker wonderfully is extremely graceful about renames. Until you get into advanced development topics, one of the things you should expect as a newer FileMaker developer, even intermediate, is you will constantly be renaming things because things that you originally think should be named something, they will end up needing to be renamed to be something else, to either be made more clear, or you'll watch a video maybe on the magazine website or pick up a tip from a blog somewhere, and you just basically, yeah, I need to adopt that. It may be a new convention or something where you are going to now need to rename this, and I'm going to call this a unstored, and I'm going to give it whatever calculated name it is. Or I'm going to call this summary by putting a prefix on my summary of the total, you know, cost, whatever it is. And maybe formerly you were calling it just total cost. And maybe you had a space in there and you learned that somewhere along the line, maybe spaces aren't as good of an idea, even though FileMaker will allow me to have those and any other characters in here, foreign characters, whatever you want to put in the field, FileMaker will support. Being UTF-16, FileMaker will even let you do this. Let me open up my little emojis. It's not going to like that right there for a bit. This dialog, by the way, FileMaker is telling you that you can't have special characters in a name. They will cause a problem. Don't try to have them. I did that whenever I was typing whatever. But if I just click here and rename, you will notice that even in your field names, if you put emojis, FileMaker will support it. It is a UTF-16 app, and you can see that those emojis come in. In fact, there's a really good tip that I picked up recently from my friend Vince Bonanno, that emojis are really pretty helpful in the context of this graph. There are lots of different settings that we put on this graph once you start to make connections between tables and setting up your database, and being able to know whether a database has particular options or particular settings. I'll just go ahead and drag it right now. I connected these two. These settings that we have in particular, create, delete, and sort. Many times you want to know that those are settings that are on a particular relationship. Oops, didn't mean to close that. But you can, within this area as well, you can use a note, which I will do right here. And you can add those emojis again. So let's go ahead and get those emojis back on screen. Show the emojis. And then I think in the symbols somewhere, there we go. This little trick right here, you can add this little check mark or this little X, or let's say the X right there. So we'll go ahead and add those two emojis. So this is something that Vince was doing, and I don't know where he picked it up, but it would be looking like this, and we'll copy that, and we'll put and sort right there. So of course you can put whatever font you want. The cool thing is this background, note that you can set this to transparent. So if you want to, you can set that to transparent, and you now have a nice little note that when you drag that out, when you put that relative to a particular relationship, you're able to get a little bit more documentation. One of the things that FileMaker is sorely lacking on, if I could grab this particular, there we go, is visual documentation. This whole relationship graph has not been updated in eons. I mean, FileMaker just keeps adding and creating new things, but they rarely go back and enhance or update their environment. So there's a lot of things that they could do here. Graphs will get so big that it would be much nicer to be able to focus on a sub area of a graph, but instead, this graph, if you're become a professional FileMaker developer, it can be so huge that you are scrolling for days. And in order to see the whole graph, you can put this down at 2% for a view, and everything gets tiny, but you still don't see everything in this one window because everything gets dragged all the way out. Although that's funny right there, 2%. It made those so tiny that they're hyper small, which is funny to even drag. Let's type in 100 here and zoom this back out. But you will get things. You can see as I drag, I don't even know what the maximum dimension is right there, but let's pretend, let's go back to that, let's go to something reasonable. Let's do 15%. So there you can see even at 15%, my slider is still active here. You end up with these interconnected groups of table occurrences that end up being so just out of control that organization becomes a very big thing once you get into FileMaker development. There we go. Got that over there. But those emojis, I wish somebody would have told me those. Collapsing, that's another one. Organization here is definitely a very big thing if you're a newer FileMaker developer. You know what? I don't even know how long I've gone here, but I'm just rambling. It's just I'm just going through, all kinds of stuff. Looks like we got a few more people that popped in here. Jason said, "Hey, Matt, thanks a lot for all you do as citizen developers." Hey, cool. Thanks, Jason. And And Michael, thanks. Yeah, I'm just out here throwing out the free stuff out on YouTube for those of you that are interested in learning FileMaker, hoping that some of you pick up some tips, whether you're new or whether you're intermediate and you just haven't seen these types of things, just things that on a day-to-day basis I take for granted. So there's a development method that I prefer when I'm doing a heavy schema development along with a UI, developing the UI at the same time. And again, the UI is what makes me excited. I got to get this emoji off. One thing to note here, watch what happens when I take this off and I click. Notice that FileMaker makes these cascading changes. So here's a key thing that may be an annoyance that you either do or don't know about. If you're intermediate, definitely if you're brand new. FileMaker attempts to, from the time of creation of something, maintain a link between things. It is only until you modify that thing that FileMaker breaks that link. And what that comes in the form of is I'm going into define database. If I have a layout based on this, so let's show the layouts. We can see my list of layouts right here, and I've got launcher, launcher copy, layout to URLs. I have not done any renaming of anything here. FileMaker will attempt to maintain that link if nothing has been changed. So if I go into this define database, and I double-click this table occurrence, which is pointing to a base table, and I rename this to something else and say OK, when I click, what you're going to notice is that FileMaker will maintain that link. That naming over there is linked to here. So when I click OK, FileMaker renamed that layout. Now that can either be an annoying thing or a beneficial thing. If it keeps everything in sync for you, just don't rename things by intention, and FileMaker will keep that link. And it doesn't matter how many times you do it either. If I double click on this and name this blah and click OK, that link will persist. Now, if I by intention rename or change something, then FileMaker will leave it alone. It breaks that internal link, and I guess some newer users don't know that that's there. So if I click to edit this and I go and call this my layout name, I have now gone into that dialog, and if I go into the define database, you can see that the disassociation now exists. FileMaker will now see that I have gone in and I changed the layout name using the layout dialog specifically to this, but the table occurrence was named this. Now the point of initiation or the cascade is such that if you don't know that this happens and you go in and rename this, but then over on this particular table occurrence launcher, which we never did disassociate, if I double click and rename this table occurrence and then it renames my layout, but I do it here and it doesn't name it here, you're like, that's frustrating. It's an inconsistency that sort of throws you for a loop, and it's until you know that that's what happens. FileMaker will attempt to maintain that link until you explicitly and intentionally change something. So if I go and change this from launcher to launcher or whatever, and it goes over here and renames that, it didn't in this particular case. It may be that, actually I should test that. It may be that once you've disassociated the link between the two, I've never really done it myself because I always go in and say, I want to rename this to whatever I want it to be. Same thing with fields and labels. If I modify this label now to whatever mine, and I drag this out, I have made some intentional changes. I've changed the content of the label, which formerly was linked to the field, and I have adjusted the size. If I rename this field and call it, ADSF, the field should change as expected, but fortunately the label does not because that link has been broken. So that's just a little nuance that you should know if you're a newer FileMaker developer, even if you're intermediate and you've never come across that, and it's just been something that's bitten you in terms of a bug. So if any of you guys that are watching this live, if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot those in there. I am out of my peripheral noticing whether somebody says something or not. Man, look at all those errors that come in the stream. I'm going to have to change my latency on the stream so that I'm using normal instead of ultra high. I have no idea what the video is coming out like. I'm just going here for this Friday. I think what I could probably do is I could probably afford to end this stream since it's going to be too long of a video anyway, and then just pick up on another stream and just go off giving more information about FileMaker. I think I'll probably do that given I'm getting a lot of errors here off screen on my other monitor. And I'll just pick up on with the same stream, and I'll just call it part 2 or something like that, and we'll show up there. All right, so check you out on the next stream.